Call the meeting to order. Marcy, wants to give us a roll call.
Sure, Jerry,
Here.
John, Justin,
Here.
Brian and Lexi. Sorry, Brian, Lexi.
Brian and Lexi, like they're one. We're not
I was
sure.
like, who's sitting over there? They're out of order.
Sorry. Yeah.
You're good.
First item is agenda for May 9th and May 23rd. So we don't have any questions about the agenda for May 9th. This is, I don't have. Yeah. Because we click on that and get it down here. So I print it out. All right, anything on the May 23rd? Questions?
Not much there yet.
I will comment on 23rd, I'll see, so if you need me, I will dial in. I will be a remote participant.
Thunder Valley residents request for tax abatement. That's going to be tax abatement on lot 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 18, 19, and 20. Tony and Terry are here. If you guys have questions of them, they're making the request. Slide it not be tonight.
Which lots?
Can we take a picture?
6 through.
Are these all the remaining ones that aren't the commercial lots?
It is. There's.
All the remaining potential. But we haven't paid anything out of TIF yet.
Correct.
That's what it started. So is this?
That's correct, right?
This would shift from being anything on TIF to everything being on tax base.
For those lots.
It's TIF or tax base.
Correct.
I was asking.
They're asking to switch it from
TIF to tax base. Okay.
That's the request.
Yeah. Their TIF was for the whole phase, correct?
Yes.
Which ones are 6 through 15?
Here, this one is the cities, and then all of these up to the top, and then these two. And these two.
Sorry. Trying to get it so it was all in there for you.
It's got an apartment on them. No.
Correct.
And these two down in the corner have a purgatory.
Here. And the ones right.
You stay in TIF?
That was my question. Are they,
That's up to you to discuss, whether you want to leave it in TIF and then give them the additional tax abatement, or if you want to, one or the other.
So what they're asking for is the lots that have buildings on there currently in TIF.
to switch them?
They only requested tax abatement on the ones that are not built on yet.
Correct.
Oh,
So we've actually, well, not received anything on, even on the buildings that are built.
Yet,
Yeah, correct.
right. So I guess what they're asking is, you want both. You want the TIF to
We
remain?
basically, I guess, on anything not built on to get some sort of, tax abatement, some sort of city incentive.
So we have to take those lots out of TIF, right? And put them into an abatement.
Right. We're gonna have to go through that whole process again.
The unbuilt lots.
On the other lots, right?
Did we
Can we
talk
do
about
that
this?
at once, or do we have to do each individual lot
We've talked about it.
You would have to do each individual lot,
at a city?
add it into the
spot
urban
over
revitalization.
$1,000
Yep.
each?
We can't do them all in one
I don't
action.
believe so.
So each
But
one
again,
would
I
have
have to check
separate
into
legal
that.
expense and all of that.
If we have to do it that way, then yes.
Didn't we talk about switching to tax abatement for those lots and at their cost?
We did.
But do we know what that cost is?
Yeah, we were gonna look at some numbers, the comparison between TIF or tax abatement.
Didn't you share costs that it would
I
cost to
did.
take?
In one of my weekly summaries, yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that number is off the top of your head? I remember you did.
Pull it back up.
That's gonna be determining whether we can move them as a group versus each individual, correct?
Well,
Correct.
I mean, there'll be a cost. If we can do it as a group, there's just one cost.
The last urban revitalization that we did, the bill was 5,200.
Is that Joel's for the county?
Yes.
Yeah, my gut tells me these could all be put into one urban revitalization plan, one process. But that's, firm that up with.
Dorsey and Whitney.
But I think that is the way it would work.
When that you included in here, I mean, we spent $9,500 for the urban revitalization plan, right, to make it a TIF.
The urban renewal, that was the $9,500 bill, but that included other projects in that bill. So we have to get a hold of Dorsey and Whitney to split that out, to know what the exact cost
Yeah,
was.
we just received that bill yesterday.
6 months later.
It was for the whole, but it was for the whole.
You don't bill that slow.
Would that have included work for like the coffee shop and for Dartford and
Yes.
those agreements too, I suppose?
Yeah,
And
it's-
amendments to the urban renewal plan for those specific projects. So
Correct,
Just a ballpark, 5,200.
correct,
If we're doing it as a group.
Correct.
to be confirmed.
I'm not necessarily opposed to it. As long as we're adding, we have to do it at their cost.
Correct.
Because we already have TIF or
Yes,
no transfer.
yes.
So I think we want to, personally, I want to see what that cost looks like. I'm sure they want to see what that cost looks like.
Yes, no,
from an administration standpoint, once it's set up and going, it's less work.
Correct, yeah.
So that's that. On the state side.
Less work than TIF.
It's
Oh,
less
yes.
work once it's set up and
Let's move it.
Yeah.
Did you-
Remind me that.
Oh, yeah.
What's the structure of the abatement?
Right, remind me of like how long that.
It's a 10-year structure that starts at 80%, and then the last percent is 20%. So we can do it any way we want. So we can go 80, 80, 80, 80, or we can do 80, 70, 50, yeah.
So I think we probably also want to know what the ask would be. Right? What the ask would be.
Yep.
And I'm not sure it's 80, 80, 88, right?
That's the first thing you
I'm pretty sure that's not the
check.
answer.
Well, it goes by years, though, right?
There's a standard.
Yes.
Yes.
scale. There's a standard one.
This
This
is
is
a standard sliding scale, or they can adjust it and shorten the term as well.
Right.
It doesn't have to be.
So I guess while we're looking at what the cost would be, you guys can put together
You
a,
get 100,
An ask.
Nothing.
Yep, you good.
And then just the next one.
I don't think you can go 100.
Nick, can you go 100, 3 years? Is
It's 100 for 3, or it's a sliding scale for 10.
that right?
100 for 3?
For commercial.
Oh.
So this is, it's commercially zoned.
Is this commercial?
But not sure if it goes to zoning or it goes to use.
Okay,
Oh, okay,
I'm almost sure it's going to be the 10-year sliding scale.
okay,
In fact, I wouldn't even entertain looking at the 3-year 100%.
okay. So we'll get the cost worked out there and with the sliding scale.
How does that work with the county? Because it's already being taxed, right?
So we're gonna have to take it out of the TIF. So we'll have to go through the public hearing process to have that removed. And then enter into the urban revitalization process, which is another public hearing.
With everybody surrounding invited, right?
So we'll have to figure out those administrative costs internally for publishing, mailing, all of that on top of Dorsey and Whitney's legal, if we want to charge for that. Which we can, I talked to Matt today, we can keep track of that in the office.
Good, thanks.
to that direction.
Good.
Good.
All right, moving on to zoning ordinance changes. Where would you like to start? Doug?
To your left.
Apologize, I was still looking at Chapter 404 is your urban revitalization chapter. Just on this last topic, finish that up. This is something to confirm, but there's the schedule you were talking about, a 3-year or a 10-year. Or all qualified real estate assessed as residential property. And as we all know, multifamily residential is now being assessed as residential property. So I think it would fall in that category of subject to confirmation. Is eligible to receive 100% exemption from taxation on the actual value added for a period of 10 years. So it might be as much as 100% for 10 years eligibility.
Okay.
Doesn't mean obviously you have to do that. But that's, again, some questions. There was some changes in the way multifamily residential is taxed, but something.
Okay, I will confirm with
Okay.
Dorsey Whitney.
So that's again on the increment value added.
Yes.
Property.
So ordinances, zoning ordinance changes. Two things going on here. One, at the public hearing recently, we kind of had a draft ordinance we were looking at. And I think in that ordinance, I don't think it really changes the discussion once, but just for record, I think I had treated both the Callahan, both of the the properties under C1. When one is C1 and one is C2. Doesn't really change what we talked about, but I needed to move things around in the draft ordinances. So on the packet, there's kind of two drafts. One of them still deals with, well, they both deal with R3, C1, C2. The goal being, as directed by the council, to basically, initially we talked elimination, then we talked about slowing or controlling the growth of apartments and condos, or apartments and townhouses. There's a number of other things in that code that I brought up in these changes, that maybe justify some attention, because there's words in there that talk about certain uses that aren't really even allowed as use. So your bulk requirements kind of describe, the conditions related to a boarding or a lodging house, but there's no definition in your code even what that is. So some things we can clean up, but big picture, talking about apartments and arguably townhouses, because there's some similarity there. So I moved things around between, section 3 and section 4 of the ordinance to deal with C1 and C2. So I think where we're at, and I'm sure I've got the right one here. So the first draft, or the first option, I think we've talked about, and the council's talked about, is allowing, based on the site plan that wasn't all that long ago reviewed and approved by the council, allowing apartments to be built on the remaining 3 lots. I'm sorry, on lot 1. Yep, lot 1. So lot 1 Callahan development, as laid out the site plan and dimension plan, would be eligible to be used as a C2 property. It could be used for apartments, multiple family dwellings, etc. That'd be kind of an exception. Nothing else in C2 would be accepted under the language of either of these ordinances. That's the only exception for the time being. Under C1, the option that we talked about previously was lots 12, 13, and 20 would be available and eligible to be built with townhouses and multifamily dwellings at this point. The developer would also like 6 through 11 and 14 through 19, as I understand it, to be eligible for those same uses. The first draft of the ordinance says we're going to put those lots into a category where they could be eligible as a conditional use. And if they're permitted as a conditional use, and I provided some information in the packet too about how conditional uses are considered and reviewed and approved. So those lots wouldn't be precluded, but they have to go through the conditional use process to get approved. Jump to option 2, the Callahan property discussion remains totally the same. Then we move to the Thunder Valley side. Option 2 removes the conditional use process and builds a process into the code where it says, as originally proposed and discussed by the council, lot 12, 13, and 20 would immediately remain eligible for construction and building. Lots 6 through 11 and 14 through 19 would still be considered permitted uses for those purposes, apartments and townhouses. But without reading what I put here, but it would be with conditions. So the conditions would be, you can't build an apartment or a townhouse on lot 6 through 11 or 14 through 19 until apartments or townhouses are built on 12, 13, and 20. They have to be done. You can't build anything on those other lots, 6 through 11 or 14 through 19, until at least 1 year has passed from the occupancy permit issued for the most recent one. So let's just, for example, say lot 20 gets built out as an apartment building, lot 12 and 13 that previously been built. So lot 20 gets built out, occupancy permit gets issued on July 1, 2024. Developers want to move on one of these other lots. They couldn't do that for a year. So after the passage of a year, they can come to the council and apply for a permit. And if they can show the council that the occupancy rate of their units are at least 80%, which is a number I think the council or some of you have talked with the developers about. If the occupancy rate is at least 80%, they'd be eligible for a permit on that next building. So the next building gets built, it gets an occupancy permit. 1 year later, same process. You know, the idea being that I think the city doesn't want to see an overabundance of apartments getting built that end up sitting empty that become a problem, not just for the city, but for the developers. So every future apartment getting built would be subject to that 1 year delay and an 80% occupancy. Those numbers aren't necessarily magical in any way. Those are just the numbers built into the code. Instead of 1 year, it could be 6 months. Instead of 6 months, it could be 2 years. Instead of 80%, it could be 70. You know, those are all flexible. But it takes the conditional use permit out of play and has a little bit more hard and fast things. These are the two things we're going to look at as a council when you consider the issuance of another building permit.
But if those are all met, if it's a year,
Yep.
that meets the year, and it's 80% occupancy, and that's met.
Yep.
Does the council still have the ability to say no?
No. Not the way it's written.
And the first option is first 3 lots, I think the additional lots are, you keep as is. But if 6 through
11 and 14 through 19.
those, then if they want to continue to put apartments,
Are considered subject to approval by the Board of Adjustment. So it pushes that consideration review process to the Board of Adjustment as opposed to the council.
so it never come back in front of the council again.
No, when the Board of Adjustment makes a decision, it's a quote unquote final decision. If somebody doesn't like the decision, what they're left to do is appeal it to the district court. I'd have to look at city code, and one thing that often is the case when the Board of Adjustment makes a decision, not every decision, but usually that decision gets brought to the council. Here's our decision. If you don't like it, you can oftentimes ask them to reconsider. And then that would potentially require a follow-up meeting by them to rediscuss it and consider some concerns the council might have had. But they don't have any obligation to change. And if they stick with their decision, that's kind of the end of it. And so either party, whether it be the council or a developer or a citizen, feels wronged by the decision of the Board of Adjustment, their course of action is to appeal it to the district court. And the only argument they really have is that the Board of Adjustment did something illegal. Not that they don't like, not that they like or don't like the decision.
We did not like the decision.
Right,
That's not a reason for appeal.
correct.
So I'm going to do the second option for the city council. Well, we have some parameters to get back before another building. Does the same apply if any of these lots got sold to somebody else? So if these guys invested in a lot and sold it to a different developer, same rules?
Same rules. And any of these lots in the meantime, this only deals with multifamily buildings, townhouses. So if somebody came along and wanted to buy one of these and put a commercial business on it, away you go.
So a commercial permitted use.
Right. Yep, this is only on those two specific uses.
There's a third option, I guess. I'd say that or let me ask this, is there a third option where we say those 3 lots can be finished as is, or as was proposed, and the other lots, there is no opportunity for lots.
You could say that.
That was the zoning ordinance that we were for being the last time. Correct. Just completely take it out. Right. Yeah. Where did we, I'm sorry, on these two options, where did we leave R3? Did we leave some capability for apartment development in R3?
No.
Okay.
Not this.
And every zoning has conditional use line
So that's how.
that will kind of be out there. If that's, for lack of a better term.
It's hard to imagine what Piasta might need 20 years from now.
Sure.
Right? And to not have any ability to get any apartments.
So I think that's when you adjust the zoning.
Right, at that point, if you feel that's
So
needed.
that we could, city council that, change it. So
It's definitely a living document. And some council are like, boy, it seems like we amended our code a lot. It happens, you know, it's a living, breathing thing.
We're a growing community trying to get things right that meet the community.
What's a little unusual is, you know, apartments and multifamily dwelling, I mean, that's kind of the title of R3. I mean, that's usually what your R3 ordinance is.
You're taking townhouses out, like even the duplex townhouse.
Only, what, well, the duplex is arguably, townhouse, I think the definition is 3 or more. Townhouse is 3 or more. Part of my concern is really, and I did pull this out, and they don't necessarily have to be, but it's the definitions. I mean, you could turn a townhouse into potentially an apartment building if you wanted to.
Townhouse is 3 or more units.
Townhouses.
Under the definition, which isn't, yeah, you can build a townhouse that isn't, but under this city code definition, it's 3 or more. And that gets back to, you know, in a way, what we're doing potentially here is sort of stopgap. While the city code gets kind of brought up to snuff with the recodification and they look through things at a bigger scale, where you could fill some of these things back in. Because under 3, you know, we pulled apartments, which seems to be, I think, well, say logical, based on the fact that we have 2 developers right now who have a lot of lots that they want to build apartments on. Then the council's concerned that that could turn into too many, but those 2 are active. So let's turn the spigot off on other ones that are not active, so they don't get active. Bed and breakfast, funeral homes, crematories, there's a lot of these other things that, you know, I pulled from R3, for example, because, you know, it just, there maybe isn't a clear definition of what it is. And so, and maybe, you know, I think one of those cases, I can't pull my screen up here, but I had a lot of comments on the sides on which ones had definitions, which ones didn't have definitions, yeah, all that stuff. So some of these are this way just because it was kind of a mess. But the end goal being really to try to come up with a solution that the council could live with and the developers could live with regard to apartments and townhouses for the time being, while the city goes through a process to update the code, including the planning and zoning rules and regs and such.
So is there a way to do the conditional use that doesn't get kicked to the board of adjustments, it comes back to the council?
For state code, it speaks to conditional uses, it's kind of, that's part of their realm. In a way, I would say what we're kind of doing, option 2 or option B here, what we're saying, we're going to wait a year and 80% occupancy are kind of conditional use type considerations, but the council's building into the code. So you're kind of keeping it with you by going through option.
But we don't have, if we don't have any option at that point to say no.
That is correct. Unless you build something else in there.
Right, I just.
I don't know what the.
What I've heard, and when I heard at the meeting, I've heard other meetings that they pulled into meetings. There is a very strong sense that we may be at capacity of tolerance for the citizens. I don't think we certainly. So my concern is that, yes, it might get built a year later, and it's at 80%. And then we don't have any controls over what else goes in there.
Well, the way this is written, it is only these lots.
Yeah, so this, once this is be done, right now, if we change the code, there's no other, yes,
yeah, so if we end up with another C2 district somewhere
it
else,
will already be out.
it'd be out.
Yeah,
Correct.
and they would know that right from the get-go. So,
This is potentially, this is 12 more lots, 6 through 11, 14 through 19. And I'll say that, I think I'm right, but that might need a little more verification that I've covered all the right lots there. And not too many, too little. I think those are the right ones. So that'd be another 12 buildings potentially.
so it's 9.
With the 3 plus
Well, they've got 4 built, I guess.
Well,
They're working on 5 and 6. When they're working on 5, they have plans for 6. Total is 15, correct?
Correct.
That is correct, yeah. Okay.
So these numbers need some correction.
I'm not sure, yeah, which ones are right and wrong, but it would be 9 more buildings than we're already going to build. And they're building at about a pace of 2 a year. Right now. The one that they're building right now will be ready for occupancy potentially around November. Before they'll start on the next one. So the next one will be ready to spring, fall, spring, summer. I mean, it's not like it's going to go, and if we put these conditions in, it's going to be at best 9 or 10 years before they'll finish.
Yeah, it's like, if assuming the 80% threshold, you're probably talking an 18-month window between projects, because you've got a year from occupancy to get your permit, and then you got to build.
Yeah.
And that's a great, it certainly accomplishes the slowing down, the concern to slow it down to make sure that they're full, and then there's a need for it, because we're guarding against devaluation in the future too, if we're saturated.
What I concern here from citizens isn't slowing it down.
Well, I think the attempt today, John, is to compromise with what the city has in the past agreed to. This isn't a plan that just showed up on our doorstep a month ago. So I think we all understand where it came from and what the feeling is. And again, this is just the verbiage. The builders feel like they had a plan, they shared with the city, they changed the plan, it went from 24 down to 15, to leave the other ones for commercial at the behest of the city. And now the way they're looking at it, the city is saying, you need to take 9 more off of this. I'm just making sure. Yeah, so I mean, are we willing to work with our developers or are we not? I mean, I think we as a council, what's that?
How long is that going to dry?
Well, I think we need to find that middle ground between, working towards the citizens and working with the developers that have come here in good faith, right? I mean, I don't know if, I think the citizens, it's more, the not in my backyard. I don't like apartments. And that's all well and good. Had that been brought up 5, 6 years ago, I mean, I think there was a better chance at that time to keep this from being the situation we're in today. Again, we can't go back and change it, so we just have to deal with this. So, I mean, I feel like after listening to developers, the city has kind of made, whether it's not a written promise, but promises that they could build those buildings.
What support adjustments, what does that entail? What do they look at if we did do something like that? Is it just here's the plan, here's the need and approve, or do they look at anything else?
Your code isn't very detailed on that front either.
Is there like public hearing or anything that they go in front of?
Usually, but your code doesn't really go into that detail. Beating up on your code.
You need to
Trust me,
improve it,
I
yeah,
know.
before it
We know.
gets used.
Yeah, no conditional use permit shall be granted unless the board determines on the basis of specific information presented at a public meeting or contained in the application for such use that each of the following conditions has been satisfied. So we've got proposed conditional use will comply with applicable regs of this title. Adequate utility range, other necessary facilities or improvements have that will be approved, adequate access to roads. Exterior lighting will be shaded wherever necessary to avoid casting direct light upon properties located in residential district. So there's some language, but it could be if there's other specific situations related to the specific fact patterns that the council could say, well, maybe the conditional use permit is good, but let's build a little bit more in there. Because there wouldn't be anything there about requiring occupancy. There wouldn't be anything in there about requiring, only so many a year. I mean,
So option 1 doesn't have any, if they get one done, they can go to the next one, get that one done.
yeah, so long as they get the permits.
Right.
You know,
That can be built in there.
You can modify the language of your conditional use considerations, sure, that's a different code amendment. Another thought, just to throw this out there too, if you're worried, you clarified that there's 15 lots, 6 are currently under consideration, either already approved or would be approved under this you're building right now. Fill up those 6 to the extent they aren't. Then we have 9 more. You could, in theory, instead of having 9 more, we could say we're gonna authorize, let's say, same rules here, no more than 1 a year, 8% occupancy, we're gonna go with 5. And then the separate section saying, here's the remaining 4. At the time we get these other 5 filled, then everybody has to come back together and talk about it, basically, because the code would say those other ones can't be unless the code would be amended again. So you can split it a little bit and say, we're gonna go with 5 right now under these rules and regs, try to work with the developer, say, what would be the 5 next ones? You know, let's identify those 5 lots. And then once those are built out, the code is gonna prohibit those other 4 with some language that says, once those other 5 are built out, at the request of the developer or the then owner, the council will consider an amendment to the ordinance to allow further development of those lots with this type of development. But that would force it to come back, have this discussion all over, amend the code, you know, so public input and all that. I know, you know, again, there's a lot of ways to do it. And I don't know, every building considered by you guys going to be 18-unit apartment? Is that what-
Some will be 12. So on the smaller lots, will be 12.
That's something else we can try to identify. We're thinking units that, you know, to the extent they'd be comfortable with it, we could talk that through. This lot would be 12, this lot would be 18, this lot would be 12. You know, that kind of detail could be provided as well.
One of the things I've been a little concerned about is just where would our other sort of non-residential commercial development go if all of these lots are eventually developed into housing? And so the project that they're doing down off Piazza Street, West Schulte's development, has like a mixed use of retail with residential on top. And I don't see anywhere in our code where we have something like that called out. Just the way I'm thinking about it, it feels like there is a chicken and an egg of, we gotta have more people to be able to get some more of that other commercial development. We want some of the other commercial development, but in order to do that, we have to have more people. I get the chicken and egg thing. And that seems like a good sort of middle ground for some of these projects to be. So we have room for actual commercial retail businesses to support, you know, and then you'd be attracting, in my mind, a certain type of clientele that would want to live in that kind of
Almost like a little community.
yeah, and I've seen those in other places and they're really cool. You know, they're cool places to live. People want to be there versus, and I'm not versus just an apartment or just a retail strip mall. It's kind of both. So I don't know, is there a way we can think about that for some of these? And I don't know if you guys are even interested in building that kind of a thing, but I'm concerned about running out of places in our commercial district that's actually can support other commercial retail kinds of uses.
I agree with you. I mean, I think that's a concern, especially the thing that's going on there. A couple of years and that's all built up. We're a prime spot for commercial property. We're halfway through there.
Right.
We won't have any commercial property to.
What do we offer unless some of the other agriculture stuff around is developed that way?
It depends what happens with Conlin and Bob properties.
Yes. We also
128.
want it to make sense with kind of how the town works, you know? And this feels like this is kind of our commercial district other than on Piazza Street, so.
Good idea.
One thing the city can do to promote that is, you know, the economic development type policy. We can provide more significant incentives for things that you want.
to fit that small.
So. I don't have a consensus on how we want this to work at this point.
Might suggest just curiosity to see if these gentlemen are able to anything we're talking about. Is that what they're thinking?
I would say as far as, last thing you discussed as far as the commercial and data and parking lot on the north side of Thunder River, yeah, there might be a couple of little lots there that would be interested in doing something like that.
If we approve it this way, they wouldn't have to. Right.
We'd want to write it in there.
So that'd be more to the model of let's agree to some lots and then some other lots we come back and discuss.
I'd have to discuss it also, stop it, but I'm sure, you know, that's something that.
And we're talking over 10-year time span too, so.
Is that something that you could identify where your 12 apartment plexes will be your 18 plexes and then possibly the,
Yeah, we have different site plans
The dual.
that we'd be able to show you which buildings were on which lots and stuff.
and then maybe a mixture of that commercial on the bottom and then residential on top, and what lots they may be on?
Yeah, we can do something like that.
What's your take on the year between permits after those first 3 get built? Or the notice of lot,
Or you're saying after, so you're saying on the remaining 6 on the north side of Thunder Ridge Road?
would be 6 or 9, you guys have better feel for that.
I think 6 of them on the north side of
On
Thunder
the
Ridge
north.
Road. So you're saying there's like option 2?
Yes.
I don't really have an issue with that.
So some, maybe communication with each gentleman and Annette with me to clean these lots up.
You guys have
Something sort of towards option 2, but trying to build in which ones will be 12, which ones will be 18. How that will work, and then maybe some language to try to see if we can deal with the commercial low or residential upper.
Some of those bigger lots.
Yeah.
To support something like
I
that.
mean, I'd like to see maybe 4 of those lots be that mixed use.
Yeah.
Out of the 6.
I mean,
Just so you guys know where our heads at, you know, so you
allow the city.
you're not
to grow.
thinking 2, we're thinking 4, and you go, oh.
That makes me wonder though too, like, as far as West's property goes right now, the bottom level, that's commercial. What is his? What's going on in there? Are they fully developed, right? So they're empty.
Right?
Well, one is full, he's working with
He's got
that.
one.
I know on the birds, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, but then the rest.
I haven't
of them
heard
still
anything
sit.
about any
And then
other.
we have a strip mall over by,
That has 2 units, or one,
One
unit,
piece is
one,
one unit left.
one soon. to
So
be.
we're talking about adding more, but there's ones that are empty currently.
We're trying to maintain commercial spots though, right?
Yeah,
That's,
I mean, I understand,
that's
but
the
it is,
goal.
something as a developer, I think you think about it saying, okay, well, now below me are all these empties, as this empty space that I put a lot of money to, that I can't currently. fill.
We talked about that the other day.
Yeah,
How fast?
and we did just add a lot of property too, I
We
mean,
have that a lot.
and we have potential to add more, right? So,
What's this, you've got the option 2, 1-year time frame after something is built. What if any of whatever lots we identified, the 6 to the north of the road, if at any time one of those is presented as commercial below, apartment above, we don't need to know about occupancy, we don't need to know, it doesn't need to be a year, they could go. So if they find a tenant for a commercial use with apartments above, that can be considered kind of more commercial, less multifamily residential, and it can go regardless of the occupancy of the time. That solves the problem of, they wouldn't do it if they didn't have a tenant, but they
Yeah.
thought they could.
I think in general, they're not gonna build anything if they don't think they can build it. So I'm more on the, how do we attract the people here and have, the quality of the building stuff is more full community rather than just residential out of the highway.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with that kind of idea.
Because it doesn't seem like it should make sense for these other units in town to be empty, but if you get 150, 200 people living right there, that might be its own little neighborhood community with some.
The Callahan's development in there is like 300 or something. That's gonna be a lot of people, but then other people are gonna be interested in having some services in it around. And traffic.
Super low people. Low areas. Where's all?
That will probably push the off ramp.
What's that issue?
As much as we can.
Do something.
Yep.
That's the different question on, so I guess it's option 2, related to the rest of Mr. Callahan's development. It would mean lot 2 and 3 and 4 would all be in the C2 over there now. And none of these things would be permitted uses for 2, 3, 4. It'd have to be the other stuff that's still listed in
Right.
C2.
And one thing I took from the last public hearing meeting, at least from the public was there, was, I was caution councils, it's really easy to think the community has spoken when you just hear from those people. There's a lot of people who didn't show up. with
Let's
opinions,
get weird.
right? But it did seem like there was some support for, some kind of 55 and older.
Yeah.
Which I think Mr. Gallen wants to do. So coming up with how that might look and how it might be defined, I think is something that should be.
Well, I wanted to make sure that like we can still bring a project like that forward in a way that we can consider it, because that may actually make a lot of sense. I don't know if that's still included in there, if it's not included. We never listed it specifically.
Right, and I don't, and that definition ever get approved?
Not yet.
No, so that's,
Once we approve it,
I think that's a piece we can work on as we start looking at code update.
I've been kind of saying the last 2 weeks, trying to
piece of time.
stay focused on what's in
I got
front of
you.
us, and this is what's in front of us. I had the conversation with Joel, we definitely heard there was interest in that.
Yeah.
And shared with him that that's my goal too, is to get this taken care of, and then the discussion can move to that at that point. So, sounds like, do we have a way we want this ordinance written that it can come to us on Tuesday?
I don't think I'm in a position to support that option.
What would it look like? For you,
I prefer option one.
option one. Just moving it to a board of review process.
Well, I don't like kicking the can down the road to someone else, because obviously we can't send it back to us. But I just don't like the fact that we could have more apartment buildings over there. It's just, that's a lot of apartments in a small area with very little traffic controls. Just- It's just not good.
Now, does the city have a board of adjustment?
We do,
We do.
and we've met 4 times.
Thanks for sounding so stressed.
Well,
Wow.
they don't meet that often.
They do not, only as needed. So
Other communities, like, we have to have a P and Z meeting, like, well, we have a problem, but what's that?
we don't really have one.
The code says you do. Yeah, but we don't have anybody on it. They gotta figure that out. So,
I think then this just will need further discussion at this point. Is it possible to write this code to allow Callahan to move forward? Because I think council in agreement with that isn't acceptable.
All permits that are pulled, and once we stop those, for any to go.
Callahan's got a couple permits that he filed for that happens at.
Yeah, from the
For lot one.
But I'm saying the other two, especially two that he's got down.
Right. But he's looking to get the permits to finish lot one. How do we get to that? We've got our moratorium still in place.
I'm okay with saying, even on Thunder Valley, is saying anything south of Thunder Valley Road is okay. Beyond that, I can't wrap my head around it.
so we could write this to authorize what Joel's looking to do on that one.
Yep.
And everything south of the road.
Okay,
Doesn't rule out something moving into the ordinance on north of the road at some point, but it allows this to go forward.
would we leave something, we would have something within there though that there are no building permits to be pulled for the north side?
Wouldn't say no building permits, but the way I'm hearing it over here anyway, is that north of the road couldn't be multifamily
So we
or
could,
townhouses.
so we could write it up that way, which would allow Joel to finish lot one and allow Terry and Sonic and Tony to finish the
South side.
the south side of.
Can you put the picture of those lots back up there again?
Yeah.
On lots are north.
On the,
So, sorry.
South side, yeah.
So 200,000.
Right.
6 above.
Well, the
one of
two
those is
that-
a retention.
Yep.
So these are the ones they could finish.
And this one
Right.
is-
So there's 6
So they've got a permit.
developable
The
lots.
one that doesn't have a line on it.
Yeah, so it ended up being, is it 12 and 13 and 20?
12 and 13 are up here, and I think 20.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the proposed ordinance, I listed 12, 13, and 20, so it'd be accurate.
Correct.
Check. What about on the north of the road, just because we touched on it, would it make sense to write in here, is anybody comfortable with writing in there if the lower level's commercial? That would be okay. Okay.
I'm not there yet.
I'm comfortable with that.
So I guess to the mayor's point, it sounds like at a minimum, we could write an ordinance that everybody could live with that would allow apartments, townhouses on lot 1 of Joel's and everything on the south side of the road. We could write that up, move it ahead, and hopefully, if that gets approved, we could continue to discuss and talk about north of the road.
That was a couple of years ago.
And then also repeal the moratorium.
Yes, because it wouldn't be necessary anymore because the code would be amended.
Thoughts?
I can do that.
What are the two lots, or what lots north of Thunder Valley would be left out then?
All
Oh, he wants us to do all those apartments.
Yes,
There's one on each lot.
yes.
except
But
where
they'd be
the,
varying sizes.
Yeah.
Some of the lots aren't the same
this one's not buildable.
size.
Okay, so 5.
No, 6, the other one is.
Maybe
7 lots there.
One without a number on it.
Okay.
is what it is.
Oh, I got you. So we're allowing for 1, 2, 3 more.
And that's single family.
They would have
homes,
nine.
up to that,
On the
Yeah,
south
nine.
side.
on Gavin,
They have 9 on the south.
a single family dwelling.
Well, yeah.
Do you have any other questions? Or you kind of feel like, you know?
No, I think that we're just kind of gonna leave everything out north of the road. That.
So right now, that's what we're going to do. I think that's the best compromise we can come up with right now.
I think Gavin Strickland, is that R2 coming down to that, could that be duplexes or is that all R1 single family?
That would be duplexes.
Could be anyway. That's all right. We come down Gavin Circle, that's all R2.
Yeah.
Could be duplexes. if you
Yes,
want.
I think
those are.
That was my memory. That was. the original plan.
So at what point do we come back to that?
That was the original plan.
Like once he gets those lines done, or they get those lines
But somebody feels the need to come back to us sooner.
Yeah.
Come back.
We can-
Our option would be.
We can talk about it every work session if we want.
Right,
What's that?
our option would be to amend it differently in the future. To actually use in the future.
Yep.
Circumstances on the ground change, see what's happening better.
See what we can do to help sell that to commercial.
Sure, that'd be great. That would be awesome.
I mean, that's our goal is to do something with that, and we need to do something else.
We need to help them out. That's 100% right. Yep.
If they sell their lots to businesses, they aren't developing the business and all those lots. I mean, it's a different.
Right.
Is there any- do we have
Yeah.
our economic development people that include? Are they out recruiting businesses?
Not yet.
Restaurants, businesses, something.
I know there's a lot of set these trucks, and part of the dilemma is there's not enough people density here to attract some of the things that we're going to attract. So it's like, how do we grow them in parallel?
Having all south side development with residential. And then having one of the big ones, here, all the residential above. And having connect down.
We're starting to bring people
Have
in.
we had any conversation with, connecting road to Gasta Street?
Through NICC, I have not reached back out to them. They were supposed to contact me once they reached out to the folks that created that nature habitat to see what their thoughts were on putting that road through there, if there was any kind of restrictions on the contract that they came together on. So I haven't heard back from them.
I just, was questioning what your two thoughts of where the senior community will
You
like.
slide over to the zone. Joel's on the C Street.
He's not talking about the zone. Just,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
where's the definition?
One's on the bottom left.
Well, it would be the definition would be where the land is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you're asking where,
No,
where the council would like to see it on that. Where do you think?
Well, if we're gonna, and we will, we're gonna go up against the neighborhoods. is what we thought.
About that point.
So I think it's lot 2.
So, yeah, and I guess to be determined at this point. I mean, I'm not sure where that best fits.
Well, the only thing is you either have to take it out or leave it in or move it.
Right now, it's not really in anywhere.
So,
So I think, yeah, I would think
So if you call that.
Right.
it would seem to me something you'd often see in an R2 or an R3. PUD or PUD. Yep, so it might mean that your lot 2 would need to be rezoned to something.
Like that's what that was.
Yeah.
So the townhouses around.
If, just as a reference, if that was the next project you wanted to go on, what you're trying to start, that you would optimally like to start. I know you're not even done with this because you.
I think by fall, we would have concepts of what we were thinking. And then we would.
Okay.
And shoot for maybe spring. I'm sure that it'll be a 2-3 phase. deal.
Marcy, can you make a note to put discussion on the June work session for coding for 55?
See what was doing on the comprehensive planning, the other area that was processed, a lot of, more smaller. Low, not low income, more moderate price for young people who couldn't afford to buy houses, that smaller, not a tiny house, but something small. That's something you think of in that area too, or not?
No, my 2 cents on it is try to get the seniors close to subdivision and try to hopefully commercial. I mean, we're in talks with hotels. Not getting feedback like we like.
Well, I think, to John's point earlier, once Dyersville kind of fills their quota or area that they have, they're gonna be clamoring that, there's gonna be a lot of people coming down that, and that's one of the reasons, like, we don't want to fill it up because of what other potential. I know you've mentioned that several times, so, I mean, you know my thoughts.
I think we would.
Okay. Oh, how many, bedroom apartments are you doing this?
2 bedroom, 2 bath.
All two? How many bedrooms? Why, you can rent an apartment? Jeez. Not so subtle, huh?
Except plan B.
Not so subtle. All right, are we good on this, everyone? Council?
So the NSCC thing, Ronald Linbaum is one of the guys. He was the one that developed that.
So your next meeting then, it'd actually be on the agenda to schedule a public hearing. Tuesday. Yeah, because we're
We'll
kind of,
schedule a public hearing Tuesday for the public hearing on the 23rd.
because we're significantly changing.
Keep
Okay.
with the maintenance guy.
Did you catch that in that?
No, I was trying to catch Jerry.
Okay.
He's on.
I do.
The next action, we kind of reset the public hearing because of the way we're changing it so much.
So Tuesday we'll have to set a public hearing.
For the 23rd.
I figure you do it, but I want to make sure.
Got it? You got it.
Yeah, I heard you.
I got it, and I got it.
Sorry.
I think, and that on this NICC, not that it matters, before you started, that's the last time I was in this building. I think we talked to the president of the college. Is he still the president?
No. Dr. Rydell, Dr. Reed retired.
Dr. Wee and others about, there's a lot of benefits to running a road through there too for accessibility to that area.
We had a great conversation with, there was just some concerns about the preservation of that, the nature scape out there.
Yeah.
What if we
Anyway.
go to the land and do another one?
We don't have any land to give.
A park or something.
What about right off in the valley? Nature reserve,
Kind of goes like this.
yeah,
through there.
I think that'd be perfect.
And then we got the trails and the-
But I'll make a note to reach out to Dr. Rydell. I mean, it's
The trail
been,
right over here.
Mayor, when did we meet with Dr. Rydell? Was it at the beginning of this year?
Yeah, because it was like October and then it went to like January or February.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of land that you go there, kick it.
Yeah, go this way a little bit, Marcy.
To the.
Show NICC.
This way?
Show
Or this way?
NICC's property.
there you go.
Yeah.
We're talking about a road across that, right, east west,
Yeah.
from kind of the cul-de-sac at the end of,
Tree all the way up to the-
yeah, the community parkway. Take out those little-
Somehow, somewhere, some way.
Connecting the parking lot and stuff, I don't.
I don't know where you connect this.
We had to figure it out at one point.
Did you go to NICC drive or which one did you have?
So we went to the roundabout, yeah.
Yeah, so it's coming through NICC
I
drive.
think it went up above the school
Oh. Above over right here.
and it connected to that road.
Really?
I thought was what we were kind of looking at the time.
So, yeah, I thought it was Enterprise, too. I thought it was coming from us and then up to Enterprise.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
It's not on that.
all those solar arrays are NICCs. So then that would be the most direct route, right? I don't know if that's-
Well, that does a lot
Direct.
to address the traffic concern on Bird, like
That's why I think
everything's
all these
loaded on
conversations
Bird.
are happening at the same
Right,
time.
that's.
Yeah. In Parkview, all the concerns about traffic over there.
Right.
you know,
It
Really,
balances.
really allows everything to flow in different directions.
yeah, we just really want to make sure that road, if it's a drain extension, whatever it is.
We'll see if we can get another meeting with,
The width
That's right
of the
on.
sidewalks.
I knew you were already thinking
Yep, got it written down, ready to go. I already sent the email.
Where is the,
Oh.
is it Enterprise? Yeah.
Yeah, for the expense of that road.
NICC, correct.
It will be
It's
offset.
NICC and it don't be another one. Enterprise.
Oh, my God.
that. I think it's just,
Connectivity.
You know, it's an ICC, I think, is there to do something up towards, where they want roads that come up a way so they can build off.
This is DOT right here.
Rise grant? Would that be eligible for Rise grant?
No.
Yeah, you know.
That was one of the first questions that came out of Dr. Rydell's mouth, was like, who's paying for it?
And then I told him he was. So it was very simple. I don't know why we didn't sign the paperwork right there.
Meeting was over.
Yeah,
It's a great meeting,
it really was good.
definitely was.
All right, I think we're good to go on that. All right, moving on then, fiscal year 23 budget amendment. What are we looking at here now?
You're on, Marcy.
Maestro?
What are we looking at here, Marcy?
All right, so let me just pull up, because there's some attachments. So if you take a look at the attachments, so we. So yeah, so the deadline to finalize a budget amendment for this year, and typically a lot of cities will do 2 a year, but we're just doing one this year. We have to set the public hearing and hold the public hearing and have it all approved before the end of May. So we've kind of gone through, I've met with the different department heads to kind of see where they're at. The first attachment under public content is just kind of your basic overall. We need to increase these expenses. And then this other what document is a copy of a spreadsheet. I don't know how well you're gonna be able to read to see it. Where's my Zoom? Can you zoom in on that? How do I zoom in on that? Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can pull it up. So we've got kind of just under each category for the police department, park and rec. So I met with Mike, Stacy, Dean, and then obviously Annette and I went through anything where we felt that, there were expenses that were unexpected or things that came up, and then explanations next to each of those of kind of why we needed to do that, or why we needed to change the expense portion of that. And then you keep going down, then obviously under water and sewer. And then the bottom section is really like a list of any of the projects that were maybe carried over from last year that weren't quite finished, that we needed to have more. We didn't have, either had nothing in the budget, or it was a brand new project that we approved during the year that we approved it. And so we went ahead and moved forward with it, but the state needs to know that, hey, we have an increase in expenses. So that's what this initial spreadsheet is. Then we also have this other document. So a total of increase in expenses, and a lot of this is going to be like your wastewater treatment plant. We had, a lot of expenses this fiscal year that weren't planned for. So this is a total from that previous page broken down. I wasn't sure, but I did go ahead and put the new debt in there for the GO bond. I had it on next year fiscal year, but then found out we're going to be getting that money in June. So I just amended that money will be coming in. And then the other ones are transfers. So Some of these are kind of related a little bit to the expenses. So like you've got, we had to replace the police cruiser this year. So that wasn't something we budgeted for, but we had the expedition that was totaled. So we need to do a transfer from the general fund where we have the police money in reserve. We put $15,000 every year. Right now there's 65,000 in there. The cruiser was around 60, so we have to increase the expenses, but then we also have to make a transfer out of that reserve account to replenish the money in the general fund. So there's just some additional transfers that weren't planned for. Like one Cox Springs account, if you look at the cash report next month, will show a negative, and the other one will show that we have extra money left in the Cox Springs account. So you're kind of making those accounts whole, clearing them up, getting them zeroed out for projects that are either negative or projects that we were under budget for, and then those monies were going to be used for the PCC, like with a reverse referendum. So you're just basically, we can make the transfers if we want to, but the state has to know that we are amending the budget to say, hey, we're going to be doing these transfers. So we'll amend the budget. And then there will be another, I think last meeting, we had those budget transfers that we already had approved from last year that I did. These will be added to that for a resolution to be done for the fiscal end of this fiscal year's transfers. So.
Are we getting reimbursed for that?
So we got a check for roughly like $30,000. So it shows here like the 28,000, 60,000 was the total cost, the ballpark numbers. We got like $31,000 in insurance. So the other 28 is that money is coming out of the police reserve fund.
That was our insurance, not the other party's insurance, right?
It was our insurance. I'm assuming that our insurance probably went back for restitution or is in the process of that. But yeah, we got paid right away. We got paid last fiscal year for that. So that went into, those funds went into the general fund, which is why I'm only transferring the 28,000.
We're gonna step up. Thank you.
Thank you.
So any questions on any of the other items? And then the other document that's in there under public is just the actual document from the Department of Management where we plug all the numbers in for their review. So then what we'll do is at the next meeting on Tuesday, we'll set the public hearing for the 23rd, and then on the 23rd, we'll have the public hearing and then approve it. Okay. Sounds listening. And if you have questions about any of these things specifically, let me know. Because there's a lot of details in there. So some of them, this one is the one I made public. Everything else is just in there for your review to dial it down a little bit deeper. So.
Any other questions? All right.
So, thank you, Marcy.
Marcy?
This next piece is fiscal year 22 transfers. So there were some transfers that were approved last year. Some of them were on the budget, some of them were amended, that were items that simply just never got transferred. So these are some of those transfers. They were already approved, and we don't have to go through and necessarily reapprove them because they're already out here. View. Where's the one page? I don't know. So,
Will we have action to take on these on Tuesday?
yes, so basically this is a resolution. It's not going to say, it's a resolution to do the transfers that were approved in fiscal year 22. And most of these were
All right, thanks,
Have a
guys.
good
to
night, guys.
clear up items on the cash report. So I'm still obviously learning. I'm like, why is this negative on the cash report? Oh, we were supposed to transfer that money in the end of last year. So for instance, this 11,794, that was something that was, we're just basically taking the money from this reserve fund to replenish the general fund. So it's a matter really of moving the money around where it should have been moved to clean up, housekeeping to clean up the cash report. But items that were realistically approved last year just never got transferred.
Any questions on that?
Figuring it out, getting it cleaned up.
All right, thanks.
So,
Marcy.
Yep.
Next up, refuse RFP, and you allowed us or shown us current contract.
Correct. Yep, there's been some interest. I've been getting some phone calls asking if we are going to switch. I think there's a lot of people that are not happy with the recycle bins, no lids on them. We've all seen the trash all over the community. Now is the opportune time. The contract ends in July of this year. So realistically, we don't have enough time to get an RFP to get out there to get bids for it. If we get closer to the end of the contract date, we can go month by month. If the council wants to go out for an RFP, that's what I would recommend that we do, just do them month by month until we get somebody else selected. So it's really up to you as a council if you want to go down that route, or if you just want to let this contract self-renew.
I would like to go down that route.
I would like to go for
When was the last time we saw the numbers from anybody else?
2020.
Oh, it's been longer, yeah, longer than that.
So this one just rolled over from last.
It's like a 3-year contract.
it. That's like,
Yeah.
Just wondering, when was the last time we had a comparison? You had everything in the file.
Since I've been-
Is that?
I think it's the same. Sure.
Hey, if it works, right? Gee.
So we did reach out to Bi-County and they would like to, and I think they have maybe one truck and they've talked about getting the other bins that automatically for like both the garbage and the recycling. Right, so I mean, that's something that they're gonna reach out to us about when we talk to them, and they said, oh yeah, they'll reach out to you when they're ready, kind of a thing, so let's find out when that's gonna happen, because we'll send an RFP to them too, right?
Yeah,
To see
definitely.
like,
Absolutely.
hey,
Yeah,
what do
that'll
you
be
have
cool.
to offer? Because we do get a lot of residents that email, call in, stop in, hey, there's stuff blowing all over the place. It's primarily the recycling is the issue.
3 of them. By county, Wisner, and Republic. Is that
Probably the main
the
three.
main
yes.
reason?
I will say this, I've got some RFPs I can send you to work from.
Okay, great.
This is a topic that's coming up in about every town.
Is it?
And almost every town doesn't like who they got.
They all have one of these. Pick your poison. Well, it's just good policy to revisit, so.
Yeah,
Probably
it is.
something we don't like.
And the recycling going around, the trucks that grab it, and bring it up to dump in the truck.
It's
gonna go
still
to-
going to happen.
I saw that, witnessed that.
Yep.
Last Thursday and this Thursday.
I have a video on my phone when I watched it happen in Monticello, when the driver got in the truck and drove away.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So I think it's good to give it just.
It's just for fresh numbers.
And just for, and I think I may have said this in one of my weekly summaries, that I've reached out to them several times and they said, we're working on it, but we're coming up on 1.5 years, and that's
Yeah,
still,
no,
we're not getting anywhere.
We'll do an RFP and if we have to go month to month at the end of this
As
contract.
long as they'll agree to month to month, right? They could say, if that's what you're.
Is that written into the?
No, it's
contract?
part of the contract, month to month,
But the price is specified.
price goes up.
The price can be moved, but it
Yeah.
just goes.
So if we can get that RFP, we can,
We can do that.
Yeah, I'll send you a few of them
okay,
if you want to look at and make your own, or if you want. Yeah, I'll pull some together.
okay. But still, I think that we're getting close enough that we're not gonna have that luxury of time on our hands
Yeah.
to be able to do the RFP,
Yeah.
July 31st of this year. So we literally have to get that RFP out this week.
I can think of 3 different communities that kind of done these for recently, so.
Okay, good.
If you're busy,
That's pretty good.
we do also offer the large garbage pickup 2 times a year. So if you have anything, like we,
like a
obviously that's
citywide
something,
cleanup.
yes. So if you have
There's some
anything,
Negatives to that, right? I mean, obviously, they build that into the charge. You get people from outside your city bringing stuff into their friends' houses to get picked up in that.
Well, they actually come to take our stuff.
Sometimes they do that.
My county doesn't even have to come to town.
so we sell the garbage tags for the appliances and TVs and tires. We sell appliance tags for those.
Yep.
And then, you know, the rest of it. And then we get billed by weight, I believe, on everything else.
One thing Republic does, is allows every location to have one bulk item per month at no extra charge.
Okay.
So, you know, that helps kind of throughout the year. You get rid of your old couch, you get rid of this, you get rid of that. That doesn't include appliances and electronics, and whatnot. That's a different process, but. And we, Monticello moved away from the citywide because it was getting so abused.
Mhm. Doug, in my former community, we had Republic,
Yeah.
and we entered into an agreement to allow advertising on the trash cans,
Oh,
and we split the proceeds, the revenues on those, so, and they had to switch out the advertising on the top of the trash cans.
Okay.
So I mean, it was a good deal. Nobody liked Republic, but it kind of goes back to,
Yeah.
nobody's happy with their carrier.
I think the best carriers are city owned, but that gets expensive and it's more employees, but they do a better job because they live there and they care, and if they don't, they're gonna get their bucks.
That's like saying, where's the swimming pool?
No, it doesn't make sense to do that.
Yeah, all right.
You gotta live with some of the other.
So we're gonna go ahead and go forward. with the-
Yes.
Okay. Resolution establishing replacement cost for mailboxes.
the discussion came up, as it does every year, when we accidentally knock out a mailbox, everybody's like, how much again do we give the resident to replace it? And it seems to be the common thread is $75. So we just want to establish that in the ordinance. So that if we have somebody come up and say, well, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, you gave me 100. So at least
That
this is,
doesn't-
So,
Hey, I've got a form that I use for that too, that I think you did,
We have a form, like a claim form for them to fill out and submit,
right?
but yeah, send us whatever you
If
got.
it's, are you replacing ones that get hit or they get hit with flying heavy snow?
they get hit by a snow plow.
Yeah,
By
because
the vehicle.
you get some too, that just the heavy wet snow is
Sure.
getting thrown off at 20 miles an hour, hits these and they blow up because they aren't very good. And should the city be replacing those? I mean, that's a policy
So-
question.
my question is, so Royal Oaks, they have the concrete pillars.
Right.
What do the other communities, like the other subdivisions have?
I have a post in the ground.
The box.
The cluster
We
box.
got the cluster box.
It's the
like
cluster box.
12
So it's just
eight
Royal
properties in one.
Oaks and that's subdivision.
Marcy, what do you guys have?
I have a post in the ground
Calls.
with one sitting on top of it. That's all my
So is
neighborhood.
that, what'd you say, how much were you thinking? $20?
75.
Does that cover it?
No, not usually.
I mean, it covers maybe because you have to buy that board that you buy at Lowe's and then the actual box itself. It depends how much of it's damaged. And then there's the labor and time to do it.
Yeah,
but
do we have a number of how many got taken
I
off
know
this past
for
winter?
two
or-
I haven't had a claim since I've been here.
So, 3 years ago, Rick Walters on Missy, DMC, and that's posted.
There was somebody this year in Royal Oaks that posted
So
that they
I guess we gotta make sure at least covers that, right?
Well, I'm more curious about your form. Is your form, is that form incorporated into the ordinance?
I have to look back, it's been a few years, but another thing to consider, I think we incorporated, there's kind of design standards throughout by the post office. You aren't supposed to have a brick column one sitting right out next to the road. They're supposed to be so many inches back, and it's, you know what I mean? Some of those real fancy decorative ones really aren't supposed to be there.
And mine is not supposed to, like, mine doesn't hang over the curb, right? So
None of them are supposed to have.
Not like a fancy brick.
No, just a stamp post, that's right.
Yeah.
And then there's.
Oh, yeah. But they are supposed to be built by US postal standards, so many inches back and blah, blah, blah. And I think I incorporated that into that form.
Put behind the curb.
How did we come up with the 75? It's just what we've usually
When
done.
I came on board, it was 75.
If that doesn't-
There's nothing identifying it anywhere.
Monticello was 50, so
Did nobody
75.
ask for it this year?
I think it was a lot less before. I think it was like $25 or $40 before that.
So if anyone asks, we can point to the ordinance and say, this is what our ordinance says.
They still have to fill out the form.
I think 75 is reasonable for a start. If somebody wants to come in and say, well, here's a picture of what it looked like before you destroyed it. And in order to get it back to that, it's gonna be $250. Either we'll have a discussion, I guess, at least.
I mean, mine has definitely been hit before because I had a chunk of wood come off of it and my mailbox was kind of like this.
Not
And
talking about when Ryan
I
was
just-
home, like,
I just kind of went like this and it was fine. So I was like, oh, no big deal, but like,
But the concrete post.
no, with the wood post.
4x4.
The only neighborhood that has the is Royal Oaks. I think it's only Royal Oaks that has
But you're also not supposed to you can't have it too far out either. So when the plow goes by, they're smacking it
Yeah,
because
right.
it's hanging too
Okay.
far over the
And make
curb.
sure to get a report from your public works guys too, because they may say there's no way to get that.
Oh, we do.
Yes.
yeah.
If someone calls me, that's our first phone call.
But anyway, I think we're 75, okay?
As long as it covers the cost, eh?
I don't even.
I don't think it's gonna,
It's not gonna cover the cost, but I don't think you wanna be out there
How much would you
replacing.
propose?
Right.
Well, I don't know what the cost of replace those posts.
I'd say $100 plus labor. For me, it's more of a pain in the
I thought.
But you
75
dig
sounded
mine up,
good.
then.
We take out a post with our plow, and you're gonna tell me you're not gonna replace it?
So long as it's legally where it's supposed to be.
Well, I guess I'm assuming, since
That's,
how many homes in Royal Oaks have them?
Well, that'd be it. They bring in a receipt that you got it replaced. Yeah, I would do the insurance thing.
That whole, if it's not quite enough to cover, we can have a higher number, and say up to a maximum of that, and show you the cost.
That's right.
You could put
You know what I mean?
250.
I don't wanna, so we got $150 or something. It's like-
Because I'm ready what it costs, them to put the post in.
It's more expensive than you think.
Right.
That I do.
the materials are probably $100. Then you got labor and that's digging it out, digging out the quick crete that you did the
Up to
first
200 bucks,
time.
up to 50, as long as you provide.
Do we have the city guys do a replacement? Who replaces them?
I think the resident
yeah,
replaces it
I don't,
themselves.
our guys never replace it.
Nothing for later.
Yeah.
John, what did you say again?
I'd be okay with up to, whatever, 200, 250 bucks. upon receipt.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Maximum of.
with a maximum of 250?
Sure. Well,
The owner get paid for their labor if they put in.
Oh, no, real cost.
Is this per occurrence?
That's an attorney question.
No, someone asked. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I made 250, guess what? You took all my.
Is it per occurrence?
Yes.
Yes.
Because if our truck keeps on doing it, man, we need
To keep this.
we got bigger issues with the driver.
Make the city guys go put them back in.
There you go.
So they need to provide the claim form, which we have, and receipts.
With receivers.
With receipts.
So up to 250 with
Let's just do
receipt
that,
provided.
and we're.
Max out.
I want them to be
I
honest.
mean, I want somebody to come and dig the hole out and bury it. I don't want to have to do my own labor either. But
No, you don't.
All right.
at that point, I'd probably just bury it and get a PO box.
The Title 3, Chapter 2 code of ordinances for the city of Castle.
Okay, Carissa was the one that brought this up, and it's the drainage tubes. It's downspout drainage tubes. People
Okay.
are taking them out the street and draining. They're putting them in the storm drains. And we really shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
So we want to limit how far away they have to be from the curb.
10 feet.
So that way the water will absorb into the ground and not into the street or storm drain.
Go ahead, Mr. Engineer.
So no issues with that, but what do you do
The
with
city
the,
to give supplies the covers
so that's very,
to put them
I-
in. There's an actual casting that they give you when you ask to put your drain tile on the street.
How do they tie that? Like into the curb?
Yeah, they just
Cut the curb.
just cut the curb, and it sits right there.
Yep.
And ties right into it.
So you're saying we shouldn't keep it from being, we should allow it to be drained to the street.
what's the damage? Why?
It just speeds up the water that goes into a storm sewer that goes into a creek that goes, flooding thing instead of letting it
Versus
sit.
absorbing into the grass.
Some pumps is another thing. Other people like to do that with their sump pumps too. I don't know if the ordinance deals with that, but especially in wetter neighborhoods where the sump pump runs with more, we've seen some curves that turn green algae because the sump pump ran so much.
And then it really becomes a problem if that's on the street.
Yeah.
And you've got bicyclists, motorcyclists.
I don't necessarily have a problem with doing something like this, but I think you're gonna have to grandfather people in there.
If they have a permit or if they just run.
They shouldn't be
A drain
permanently
tile or
draining in the
what-
storm drain.
Well,
I don't think you,
my house,
Anybody that's
I've
doing it in the
got
box.
one that goes, come out,
that's
and
no.
it's ran, and I didn't build the house, runs through the curb cut into the street. I just, and I think there's a lot of people.
I see a lot of them out there.
There's a lot of them. And that's what I'm saying, if we tell everyone's people they gotta do that. It's gonna be a problem.
So
10 feet, you're out
are we saying we would allow them to bury it and get curb cut at their expense? I mean, we're talking, what you're talking
No,
about.
what I'm saying is-
Marissa brought up is drain tile that just goes across the sidewalk.
Across their yard, right into the street.
Yeah,
Exposed
okay.
one.
Correct, yeah,
Yeah,
above ground.
Yeah, if it's above ground, yes,
So
And that-
for the
that-
nuisance is for above ground.
Correct.
Got it.
okay.
Got
That'll be the way
Yeah,
to
no, it's
handle it.
like-
I just, to be a lot
Yeah.
of problems,
There'd be
maybe
a-
that can make these people do something different.
I think we're okay with that part of it being unused.
But they shouldn't be putting them into a.
Where does it say that here?
Where is it at? She brought this up. I was looking for it. I don't know.
Trust me, my neighbor
I think it's.
came right up and told me about what I could or couldn't do.
No, it's the structured drainage,
I live right for,
water discharge on the other.
and there's a drainage ditch right behind my yard, not on my property.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's his.
This here?
What are you talking about, that guy
Yeah, I sure am.
across the way?
So is all, I should have looked at the old one, is all this language new language?
I didn't bring it
Yes,
up.
it is.
All 16 of these are
All
new
16.
and more specific. The
Correct.
other one
Yep.
was just a generic statement or something.
Mhm.
She didn't, yeah. We'll have to show her how to do it, like make the red part the new part, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get to that.
I would say that language seems to tie if they they can produce what they want with it, so long as it doesn't cause erosion, subsidence, loss of lateral support, or other interference with impairment of lawful use of other property. So that's kind of, but if you then read the next line, device shall be terminated minimum 10 foot from the property line. If the slope of the yard is less than 3 to 1. Or 10 foot before the top of the slope, that's a little bit more black and white. If somebody's out there determining the slope. How was gonna do that? Mayor? You want some power?
Yeah. I don't want to be a weak.
And
You're draining on your neighbor's property, that's been wrong anyway.
Right.
16, is 16 the new piece and that's it?
that came up meetings
What?
Kicked
Is
every
16 the
time
new
somebody-
part?
before the net start that came
All
up for one of
16
the
or just-
developments.
I thought all
Kind of
16.
building up their lots. and
So where did
sending
she
all
get the
water
wording from? Like,
to the
after?
neighbors on the backside, remember that?
Yes, yes.
They were rightfully concerned about that.
But I think it's fine now.
Good.
So are you saying about 16?
So how do we want this changed?
My understanding is we don't have anything now, and then Krista took this from what Asbury has.
I don't mind that.
That's fine.
This is just where it's on top of the.
Above,
Right, above, yep, above ground.
basically saying you can't take your downspouts, tile them over and to the neighbor's property line.
If you're gonna do that, very good at night.
And replace
It's just,
This doesn't speak to above ground or below ground, to be clear.
Yes, I think we need to specify.
Maybe we'll have to do some more work, get some feedback from you guys and
Yeah.
do some more work on the ordinance, the
Yeah.
wording.
And bring
It
it back
sounds
in
like you're
June.
generally okay.
Bring it back
with
in
so
June.
long as it's underground.
yes.
As long as it's underground and on the street,
Not onto a neighbor.
not on the.
Not under that. Okay, we'll get some more work on that.
Okay.
Ordinance amending the Title 6 Physical Environment, Chapter 5, Utilities Code of Ordinances of the City of Piasta.
Yeah, so right now our ordinance just states that after 2022 that it's supposed to just go up by 2% every year. I learned at clerk school last year that you cannot put a percentage in there, that you need to have specific, so it's paying for itself. You need to have specific dollar amounts in there. So what I did was I went ahead and I did dollar amounts starting with fiscal year 24 for the next 5 years. So this will just amend the ordinance that we already have to, instead of saying by 2%, to these amounts. Like the first few years that they did the last ordinance, it did say specific amounts, and then it just said after that, increase it by 2% until we revisit with, you know, the debt we have for the treatment facility and that kind of thing. So
That's very common. A lot of them still have those percentages. And I think the state auditor gets hung up on, the code says you have to, by ordinance, have your rates. And if you say 2%, that's not your rate.
yeah, and I think it's just easier too for us, like, this is what it is.
It's right there.
So our previous ordinance did also have an increase of on the garbage by 2% every year, and we kind of talked about it. We're actually charging our residents more than what we're being charged for the refuse. So I didn't have anything in to increase the garbage at all going forward. Now, once we get the RFP back and see what that looks like for pricing, then we can certainly amend this again before hopefully July 1, maybe. So we don't have to necessarily adopt this right now, but we want to get it adopted by July 1st.
And then I haven't put the legend in there because when we start talking about the FY23 rates for 24, it's like the average lay person's gonna look at this and say, what's a WR, what's a WI, what's a WC? So that helps, if anybody chooses to read our ordinances.
It's like
Marcy, do we have to dictate them all the way out to FY 28?
we don't, but I just thought, let's do 5 years. That way we don't have to redo new ordinance every year.
It's never fun increasing rates, so do it once instead of every year.
And maybe by
You can
then,
change them, kind of like the
Yeah.
zoning. If you decide 3 years from now, if that's not enough, or it's too much. you can
Well, that
change
was gonna be my next question. If in 3 years we decide to need something different, we have to amend it.
Yeah.
Another year.
Every document we have is a living document.
Okay.
Great work, Marcy.
Thanks, thank you.
All right, moving on to proposed Terry Oaks playground equipment.
There's a tax abatement urban
Did I miss that?
revitalization policy on there. Last December, we passed the TIF guidelines and I promised you that I would do the tax abatement. So this draft pretty much just reads almost verbatim to the Iowa code. So it states what's allowable by code and what we would do to try to help with a project. And I did just put this in today, so I apologize.
I probably printed mine out.
Yeah, you did. And then again, I just, I had it there and I wanted to
I
get
don't
that
even
off.
know
my
everything.
chest.
Just to make
That's
it.
right.
Thanks, guys.
See you, Ben.
So this would have to be passed by resolution, and I have the resolution ready.
You said we went to board and.
Oh.
Gotta meet this deadline.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions on this? I think we'll go ahead and put it in.
Thank you.
Welcome. Now, Kelly Oaks Playground Equipment. Jerry, Justin, any questions? And we'll go take a look at this stuff. I was impressed.
It's really cool.
Is this being installed by?
We don't know that yet. It is not going to be installed by our.
It's not gonna be the city council. Let's just say that. We'll start there.
I know it's more complicated than.
Yeah, Dean said no.
Right.
Yeah, That's,
It's not as easy as your backyard. This one says.
They said they did the one Brent Gold Diamond.
Never again.
That was big enough, and this is probably quite successful.
I mean, does this company that you have these pictures from, do they? I'm guessing. we would-
They have contractors listed, so, I mean,
I mean, but that's when we get there, we can.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but they said we can order this now,
We have pretty much have to order.
have to order it now because there's a X amount of money in their discount fund. And once that's gone, it's gone.
It's like 25%.
So our plan was to order it now, and
What's it cost on this right now?
I thought we went up to 100
No, for this.
all for that.
Five.
Just the equipment was, the whole playground set was a little over 100, I thought.
That was 94.
Do we get the mountains in the background too?
Yes. Yeah, the mountains in the background.
That's an old landfill.
Not trash more.
Yeah, no trash more.
But the lead time on this is 6 to 8 weeks.
But
Dean thinks he has a spot if we need to store it for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
the West Dubuque's isn't still isn't in, correct? Isn't that what we were, no, you weren't in it. We were discussing that. To actually get somebody out there to put it together was
Well, that's the problem.
a while.
Oh, wow.
So do we need to do anything as far as approve that you're, that they want to purchase this?
No, this was just kind of an information, I believe.
I like that
I,
information. If people are asking.
Yeah.
Something.
But we're getting a lot of foot traction on Facebook with that posting that's put out there. So we're just going to keep doing that. As soon as we order this equipment, we'll put it out there.
I think it's a lot. You do that and we get rid of some of the other problems.
Yeah.
with that.
Yep.
Go with it.
I thought too.
Good stuff.
All right, we need a motion to move into closed session at this time.
Yes, you do.
Thank you.
I will make a motion to go into closed session in accordance with chapter 21.51C of the state code of Iowa, which reads as follows: to discuss strategies with council in the matters that are presented presently.
Whether it's.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
I will second the motion.
Do we need to close the door?
I suppose. when we're
So I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording our Zoom.
Turn the Zoom off. And then,
Or just, can I just end the Zoom completely?
well,
Well,
is everybody on it?
yeah.
One person.
You know, in theory, you come back into open session after the closed session.
Right.
There won't be any action items.
Right.
So it won't, it's up to you.
We can turn off our mic and video, though, right? We can instead of closing that.
I know, I don't know where to go.
I said, I don't want to
I was
slide.
like, yeah, I was always.
Back to the-
We are in open
second
session.
in.
So now what?
Give a motion to adjourn.
Hold on.
I guess you don't have to make a motion. We can just adjourn whenever you're ready.
We are going back again.
Yeah, we're back in the open.
All right, so now we need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Justin, I.
We don't really need to do that.
I'd say we don't really usually guys make a motion for a work
Well,
session.
we're
Good practice
practicing.
for these guys. Hey, a couple of items just very quickly out of either session.